So there's two elements of this that are my area of expertise in working with people. And the first is that many of you feel challenged to retain the good people that you've got. Retention is an issue. And the other issue is that many of you feel challenged to get the best performance out of the people that you've already got. So performance is also an issue. These two things, retention and performance, are among the things that are keeping you up at night. And I will say, for good reason. Because you should be concerned about retention and performance, because these are two things that you have a tremendous influence on. Research has shown that when it comes to retention and performance, the single biggest factor is your leadership. There was a Gallup poll done of over 10,000 business units, and they concluded that people leave managers, not companies. In the end, turnover is mostly a manager issue. And that same poll also concluded, what's going on? We have sound effects. Anyway, that same poll also concluded that 50%, the work groups that are poorly managed are 50% less productive and 40% less profitable than the ones that are well managed. So that the way that you lead your people and the way you get your managers to lead your people, this is the biggest single influence on performance and retention. So this is good news, because what it means is that you can do something about it. I wonder if we can do something about this. Hello, hello? Can you hear me at the back? All right, good, thanks. Anyway, I'm saying that this is good news because it means that you're in a position to do something about it. So here's the question that we're going to look at today. What actually is the best leadership technique when it comes to retention and performance? And it's this. Ask yourself this question. How much does your business bring out the best in your people? And I'm not just talking about job performance here. I'm actually talking about a bigger perspective. How much does your business bring out the best in the people that work for you? Do you actually help to bring out people's trustworthiness? Do you help to bring out their generosity? Do you help to bring out people's intelligence? Do you help to bring out their wisdom, their empathy? Do you help to bring out people's good heart? Does your business offer people a place where they can discover the best in themselves? Now, when people feel as if what they do brings out the best in them, they want to stay and do more of it. And they want to give it everything they've got. Retention and performance are no longer an issue. So I am talking about some pretty personal stuff here. Empathy, good heart, wisdom. And so I would not be surprised if some of you were thinking, look, I've got a job to do, and I just need people to do it. And people's personal stuff, well, frankly, that's none of my business. But people's personal attitude is the core of your business. People's personal attitude is what makes or breaks your business every day. And if you want to succeed in business, especially in challenging times, you have to get personal. You have to be able to work with people on the level of their personal attitude. So yes, you've got a bottom line to focus on, and yes, you've got deadlines and limited resources and all the ordinary challenges that every business faces. But if you want to make your business extraordinary, you need to look beyond those things too. You need to look at the ways that all of the things that people do in your business affect their attitude and affect their ability to feel as if it brings out the best in them. So, okay, I'm psychologizing a little bit here perhaps, and maybe some of you are thinking that I'm some kind of leftover hippie softy. But that's actually not the world that I come from. My first career was as an architect in Boston, and I dealt with large sums of money, I dealt with demanding clients, I dealt with ornery contractors. And believe me, construction is not a place for softies. And when I left architecture to go to sea professionally, I was a tall ship officer in command of crews of sailors on long voyages on stormy oceans. Believe me, that also is not a place for softies. I'm not actually talking about soft stuff here. I'm talking about effective stuff. Because I've sailed with crews who loved their work, and I've sailed with crews who hated their work. But the work on ships from one ship to another is in many ways the same. You stand watch, you deal with the weather, you scrub the decks, you tend the sails, you fix the rigging. The crews that were the best crews were the ones that had a captain who understood that it's important to look beyond just the tasks themselves. A captain that understood that the key to effective leadership is looking at every detail of the work from the point of view of how does it affect people's attitude. So here's the biggest lesson, the biggest leadership lesson that I've learned at sea. The kind of leadership that helps people discover the best in themselves is leadership that is a practice of generosity. Now, generosity, really? I mean, isn't leadership about trying to get people to do what I want? It's not. Leadership is about getting people to do what they want. And what people want is to be the best version of themselves that they can be. So let's get a little more concrete here. Let's look at a practical example of this. Let's actually go on a tall ship voyage together, and you'll see what I mean. This is your ship. This is the square topsail schooner Californian. And she sails the Pacific Ocean and the west coast of California and the United States. And I'll begin by congratulating you all because all of you have just been promoted. You've just been promoted to be chief mate of this ship. Chief mate is second in command. You could think of it as the chief operations officer. So here you are standing silhouetted there on the foredeck in your broad-brimmed hat. That's actually me in the photograph. But for this story, this is you. And you are directing a crew member who's climbed up the rigging there to try to get a sail down. Because that's what you do. As chief mate, you direct the crew. The captain gives an order, and it's up to you to make it so. So, for example, one of the basic maneuvers of handling the ship is called tacking. How many sailors are there in the room? People who know what tacking is? A few. Well, you'll be interested in this because it's tacking at a slightly different scale than you're probably used to. And for those of you who aren't sailors, or I should say those of you who aren't sailors yet, tacking the ship is turning the ship in a particular way toward the wind, and it requires the crew to handle all of the sails in the right sequence and in the right timing and in a hurry as the ship turns. So this is how it works. Let's say that you're sailing under an old school captain who likes to see things done in the traditional way. And we'll call him Captain R. So Captain R is back at the helm, and when it's time to tack, he shouts out with a voice that carries to the masthead, "Ready, about!" And then you leap into action, and you jump up on the hatch and start directing the crew, and you say, "You there, stand by the leeward headsail sheets, and you two to the windward. You to the staysail, and you there, stand by the topsail braces." So don't worry about the salty lingo. You're the mate now, so you understand all of this. But you're telling everybody exactly what to do. And when you see that everybody is in place, you shout back to the captain of the wheel, "All ready on the foredeck!" And the captain replies, "Helm's a lee!" And the ship starts to turn. Now you are focused on the sails. And as the ship starts to turn and the wind starts to catch the sails, at just the right moment, you call out to the crew, "Pass the flying jib and pass the jib." And the crew start madly hauling away on the sails. And a moment later, at just the right time, you shout out, "Pass the staysail!" And the crew jump to the staysail. And then it's let go and haul the topsail braces. The topsail swings around. So the ship is off on her new course. The tack is beautifully executed. And you believe that all of this depends on your voice. And you've taught the crew to believe this too. Everyone is looking to you. But now let's look at a different approach. Let's say that Captain R has gone ashore for some well-deserved leave, and you're sailing under a new captain, Captain Andy Ray Ellers, who's the real-life captain that I sailed under on this ship. And Captain Andy has a different approach, especially if you're doing day sails in a harbor and you've got passengers on board. So then the deck is covered with landlubbers spilling their drinks and dropping food on the deck. And having you leap up and shout commands, well, Captain Andy has a different view of that. So Captain Andy always wears a ball cap when he's sailing. He's back at the wheel, charming the guests. All the guests want to talk to the captain. But at some point, he turns his ball cap sideways, like this. Now, you and the rest of the crew are also mingling with the guests and telling your sea tales. But at some point, you notice, one person notices the ball cap, because everybody has been trained to have half an eye on Captain Andy. So someone notices the ball cap, they excuse themselves from their conversation, and they move to position at a sail. Someone else notices them moving, and they move too. And pretty soon that awareness has rippled through the entire crew. Everybody is in place. Now you signal back to Captain Andy at the wheel, and he turns his ball cap backwards. Now the ship starts to turn, and the crew are focused on the sails. And as the ship turns at just the right moment, as the wind starts to catch the sails, the crew pass the flying jib, and they pass the jib, and a moment later they pass the staysail. They wait, and at the right time they let go and haul the topsail braces, and the topsail swings around. The ship is off on her new course once again. The tack is beautifully executed once again. And you have said nothing. No one has spoken a word. The crew know their job. Maybe one time they're a little slow, a little fast on the staysail, and you need to tell them to wait. But you don't say anything. This is the command for hold, because the crew also have half an eye on you. So they see your fist, they wait, and at the right moment you can let them carry on. Now, when the tack is done, you go back to your conversations with the guests, and they say, well, that was very smooth. We didn't even hear any commands. How did you know what to do? And you smile and say, many hands, one mind. When we're in sync, the ship tacks herself. So let's look at this a little more closely. When you and Captain R gave commands for every step of the maneuver, you gave the crew clarity and precision and success at tacking, and these are generous, important things to give. You also gave the crew dependence. They couldn't do anything until you told them to. You gave them lack of trust, because you implied that you didn't think they could do it themselves. And you gave them tunnel vision, because you didn't want them to pay attention to the big picture, but just to listen to you. These are not generous things to give. This is not the kind of leadership that encourages an attitude in people that helps them find their personal best. On the other hand, when you and Captain Andy let the ball cap give command, you still gave the crew clarity and precision and success at tacking. You also gave them mutual trust, shared responsibility, and the ability to be aware of the task and at the same time be aware of the big picture. This is the kind of leadership that is generous enough to encourage an attitude in the crew that helps them discover their personal best. Now, in both cases, the tack was the same. The task doesn't change. Generous leadership does not change the tasks that we have to do. We still have to do whatever has to be done. Generous leadership changes the attitude of the people doing the tasks, and attitude changes everything. It is not enough to lead people's activity. You need to find a way, if you want to bring out the best in people, you need to find a way to lead their attitude. And the paradox of this is that by giving less direction, you actually got better performance because you got better attitude. When it comes to leadership, less is more. And what would it be like in your business if your team could complete a complicated maneuver on time and all you had to do was turn your hat? So this kind of leadership has a name. It's called leadership by exception. And the captain of the U.S. Coast Guard Eagle has something to say about this. The Eagle is the ship that trains all the U.S. Coast Guard cadets. And remember that in the U.S., the Coast Guard carry guns and catch smugglers. So the captain of the Eagle says this: officers give orders only if a problem develops. Leadership by exception is typical of a warship in a high-threat environment, where the extra seconds used in passing commands down the chain may be fatal. This kind of leadership is also known as the power of just enough. And so I'm going to actually give you some guidelines for using the power of just enough. We're going to talk about some simple rules for generous leadership. But first I should talk a bit about this notion of simple rules altogether, because simple rules is in fact a formal leadership concept that came out of some interesting research. It's simple rules for complex situations. So what do we mean by complex situations? Well, there's three kinds of activities, three kinds of situations. The first is simple. And simple activity is like baking a cake. There's a recipe, you follow the recipe, you get the cake. You follow the recipe again, you get the cake again. So it's repeatable, and there's a recipe, and it's easily managed. Complicated activity is like building a rocket ship, or I dare say like building a network. So complicated activity, there's plans. If you follow the plans, you get the rocket ship. If you follow the plans again, you get another rocket ship. So it's repeatable, there is a recipe. It's not easily managed. It can be a challenge to manage, but it's definitely manageable. The third kind of activity is complex activity. And complex is like raising a child. So there's no recipe. It's definitely not repeatable. You raise one child, and then you raise another that you think the same way, and they turn out different. And you definitely cannot say that it's a thing you can figure out how to manage. You can't write a manual for it. So any kind of activity that involves people is inherently complex. Building a network may be complicated, but leading the people who build it is complex. And there's been some interesting research into leading in complex situations. And out of that research has come this idea, this leadership concept of the simple rules for complex situations. Part of this was done by some scientists, artificial intelligence people, trying to get their computers to simulate the behavior of a school of fish. Now, you might think that the behavior of a school of fish is very complex, tremendously flexible and adaptive and responding to predators and all of that. And so the computerized fish would need a lot of instructions in order to be able to imitate that. But the researchers discovered that actually that's not true. The more instructions they tried to give their computerized fish, the less like real fish they looked. And in fact, there were only 3 rules that the fish needed in order to behave like a school. So here's a school of computerized fish, and these fish are following 3 simple rules. The first is don't bump into each other. The second is head toward your neighbor's position. And the third is head in your neighbor's direction. Only those 3 rules. And they found that if they gave the fish more directions, they looked less like a real school of fish. More instruction, worse performance. So this is the power of just enough all over again. And what would it be like if the people in your business, if your team could be as resilient and as flexible and as cooperative and as mutually supportive as a school of fish? So that's the background on this concept of simple rules for complex situations. And here are the simple rules for generous leadership. The first rule is give what's needed. And the second is don't give what's not needed. The third is know the difference. Give what's needed, don't give what's not needed, and know the difference. Now, obviously, knowing the difference is the hard part. And some of you may be thinking, well, that's not really very helpful advice. How am I supposed to just know the difference? How do I magically know? Well, if you feel as if you don't know, the easiest way, of course, is to ask your people. When was the last time you asked any of your people, what do you need more of to be able to find your personal best at work? What do you need less of to be able to find your personal best at work? Maybe some of you are asking these questions, but on the whole in business, we do not ask these questions anywhere near enough. So ask your people, and they'll tell you. And the other question is to ask yourself, how can I use the tasks that are already in my business? How can I use them in such a way that they also influence people's attitude in a beneficial way? So whenever there's something to do, what this means is that you can look at it through 2 different lenses. One lens is how do I accomplish the task? And the other lens is how can I use that task as a way to shift people's attitude? Because personal attitude makes or breaks your business. You and Captain Andy understood this when you tacked the ship in silence. You had to tack the ship anyway. That was going to happen one way or another. But you were able to find a way to do it so that simply tacking the ship had a beneficial effect on people's attitude. Tacking the ship allowed people to discover the best in themselves. To change people's attitude, we have to use everything at our disposal, all the allies of our ordinary day, as ways to help them find their personal best. So, we're going to get practical again. Time to get a little more concrete. We're going to actually do I have a problem for you to solve. And this will be an example of what I'm talking about, an example of accomplishing a task and at the same time using that task as a way to work on people's attitude. So this is actually a fairly complex problem that we need to solve, but it's something we need to do on our feet, moving around, which means that we need some space to do this. So I'm actually going to ask you to move the chairs. But I'll just say beforehand that there's some simple rules for moving the chairs. So there's the task to do, right? But I'm going to try to do it in a way that actually has an influence on your attitude as well. So the 3 simple rules for moving furniture are these. Make as much open space in the room as possible. Now, there's 2 constraints on that here. We can't move the tables in the front because they're wired, and also we want to be sure that we don't block any of the exits. But the first thing we need to do is make as much open space in the room as possible, because there are quite a few of us and we're going to need that space. The second rule is that no one is in charge. And the third rule is that no one speaks. So this is very interesting, because when we don't talk to each other, we pay attention to each other in a completely different way. And when we don't speak, I invite you to notice what effect this has on your attitude, and also on the efficiency of performing the task. So these are the 3 simple rules. Also notice how difficult it is actually not to speak. You may notice that suddenly you've said something. Why? So this is my invitation. Please follow these 3 simple rules and make it so. Very nicely done. Thank you. So, let me ask you, what are your comments about that? Chairs are gone. Task accomplished. Say again? You can now. I give you permission. Does anyone have any comments about that experience? You are. We get to follow the simple rules again. So what comments do you have about this? It's efficient. Yeah? You think it's more efficient than if someone were directing it? Yes. And say again? I did direct it. It's true. Yeah. Any other comments? Yes.
There was something I noticed in this place with this guy. I noticed him stacking chairs, and instinctively, instead of going because of the short corridor, I just passed the chairs to him, and without talking, we sort of worked together.
Nice. Did everybody hear that? Yeah. Yes? You were going to say something? Ah, it's true. So it was actually a learning exercise as well as a accomplishment.
Well, there was a base sense of knowledge here that we all had.
Okay. Right. Good. Any other comments? Yes. Mm-hmm. You could see each other doing the task, and so you could tell that everyone was contributing and that it was getting done well. Yes. Trusted and relied on each person to take care of their task. Yes?
It may be a function of how many women were in the room. That the men just sort of took the chairs from us and started stacking them. So it was very interesting.
That is very interesting. Yeah. And I wonder if the men who did that noticed the way you noticed.
I don't know.
Question. Down here. Yes. And how does that affect things? Are you saying that that's a way to work with attitude? Yes, because we're all standing now. That in itself has changed the whole dynamic here, right? Plus, I'm standing on a chair, for goodness sake. Yes? Right. That's very true. Yeah, obviously the sophistication of this approach to command assumes that people are able to accomplish the task. If people are not able to accomplish the task, you are in training mode. But all of these principles apply in training mode. How can you use the training exercises as a way for people to not only learn the task, but also to work with their attitude? And I've done this with all age groups. Well, little children I haven't done it with, so I can't tell you. Please invite me to do that someplace. I'd be intrigued. Anyway, yes. It's true. You rarely get to do one thing at a time. Okay, so let me be perfectly clear about this. I am not a business person. I mean, you can tell, right? I mean, I have run a successful architectural practice. I ran a successful nonprofit for many years, but I don't claim to be a business person, and I do not claim that, what shall I say? I'm not giving you a business plan here, right? I'm not giving you like management details. I'm giving you principles, and you need to find a way to apply these principles in your own situations because everyone is very different. We'll talk about this a little more as we do the second exercise, which is much more complex. But one of the lessons for me about this is that speech altogether is hugely overrated. Now, this may be an odd thing for a public speaker to say. But it's very true. We just all talk way too much. And we tell each other all kinds of stuff we don't need to tell each other. And it's a waste of time. So the more that we can speak less and know more, this whole principle of knowing the difference, leadership is much more about knowing than it is about doing. So the more we can know what needs to be said and what doesn't need to be said, the better we can handle 3 phone calls at once while moving the furniture. Okay, so thank you. We're going to actually have this problem for you to solve. And it's actually a pretty complex problem. I want each person in the room to choose 2 people in the room, silently, don't tell them who they are, but pick 2 people to be your markers. Doesn't matter if they're close to you or far away, but pick 2 people to be your markers. The problem is to position every person in the room in such a way that each person is equidistant from their 2 markers. Does this sound like a complex problem? Good. Does anybody feel as if they want to lead the solution to this problem? Who would like to stand up? And you can ask people. I could say, so who are your markers? And you tell me, and I'd say, okay, you 2 people stand here, and then who are your markers? And you 2 people stand here. Anybody feel as if that would be an interesting challenge? Not one. Really, why not? You don't get the task? The task is to position each person in the room in such a way that each person is equidistant from the 2 markers that they have chosen for themselves. Nobody knows who the markers are.
And I have a right to move people around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well.
Everybody has the same right at the same time.
No, I'm asking if there is an individual who thinks that this would be a good thing for them to take leadership of, that this is going to look good on their resume. So I'm actually glad to see that nobody does, because it wouldn't look very good in your resume when you see the outcome. But just imagine if that were the case, and I'm sure there's lots of parallels in your world, that somebody is trying to solve a very complex problem on their own by telling you what to do. So not only are you spending most of your time, in this case, waiting around for me to try to figure out that I can't do it, but you're also looking at me thinking, well, I could do a better job than him, and you know, that would not be an approach to this problem that would be beneficial to your attitude. The way we're going to solve this problem is very simply, I'm just going to say, please solve it. And we're going to do this again in silence. We don't need to speak. But everybody just move until you are equidistant from your 2 markers. Does anybody believe that this won't work? Few people believe that this won't work. Well, we'll see. But anyway, are we clear about the instructions? Just whoever the two people you've mentally picked, move until you are equidistant from them. We will know the problem is solved when we all stop moving.
Stop doing that.
So I invite you to see if you can do this without speaking. Are we there? Is everyone equidistant from their two markers? Nicely done. So how long did that take? Less than a minute. Less than a minute, right? The internet, as far as I can tell, is pure magic. But it seems to me that this is actually a little bit like the internet, the way we solve this exercise. It's a little bit the way the image to me is similar. So, thank you very much. Comments about this, please.
What happened? How did you know this was going to happen?
I have done this before, yes. That would be a bit of a risk. How did it happen?
Self-organization.
Self-organization.
One person stopped moving first.
One person stopped moving first, perhaps, yes.
Some people in the room are not markers
For anyone.
for anyone. So their adjustment with their two markers doesn't affect other people.
Yes, that's probably true. There are people who are not markers for anybody. There's also probably somebody in the room who's markers for 12 people. And every time they move, everybody moves. Right. Yeah. I wonder what does this tell us about you? Yes.
I'm still really worried about who's putting back the chairs.
Right. Thank you. I sympathize. I recognize your position in this.
So
What was the purpose? Please tell me.
No, I'm moving you.
Well, I'm not gonna tell you. What is the purpose? Yes.
If you had tried to organize any one of us to try to put a take in an hour,
Yeah, might not have succeeded. What else is the purpose?
I think every individual had a task to accomplish.
Hmm.
They knew what their task was.
And that we're all connected.
That's it.
Hmm. What did you say?
Simplicity.
Simplicity. Yes. Yeah.
I was going to say that each individual's task was actually very straightforward and simple, be between your two markers. So you kept to that, everybody kept to that, and it sort of worked its magic, basically.
Right. Well, for me, the point is 2 points. One is this is an interesting way to accomplish a complex task, right? Less is more when it comes to leadership. Know what is needed. Don't give what's not needed. This did not need direction, so know the difference, all of that. That's one point. And the other point is that the way that we chose to solve this exercise had a beneficial effect on your attitude. Made every person in the room feel as if they were contributing, made every person in the room feel attentive, aware of their colleagues, perhaps sympathetic with their colleagues, right? This definitely is a way of accomplishing a task that this was part of my intention around it, is that it would accomplish the task and it would also have an effect on people's attitude. It would help people feel the best in themselves, yes.
So this obviously worked because there was a high degree of willingness to cooperate.
Yes,
And what if there is not a high degree of willingness to cooperate?
right.
We'll continue until morale improves.
Exactly. There's a lot of further discussion that this needs. Our time is short here, and I need to draw this to a close because other things need to happen. But I invite you to take that question home with you, and for all of you to take any of these questions home, and to experiment. Pick something small and simple at work, and see, can I use this thing that we already do anyway, can I tweak it somehow in a way that will actually shift people's attitude? Now, if you've got stone walls all around you, you're going to have to pick something very small and simple. But the more of them you pick, the more holes you start to make in that wall. Okay? So we do need to put the furniture back together. Please note that there are 2 doors here which need to have aisles to them because they are fire exits. Otherwise, you already know the 3 simple rules for moving furniture, so please make it so. And let me remind you that this is an opportunity to practice doing this without speaking. How does that affect your attitude? Why is that hard to do? For me? Don't know where it goes. Thank you. Very nicely done. Permission to speak is granted. All right, good. So I want to ask you to do one more thing before we close, something short. It can be lonely at the top, as we all know. Anyone in a position of leadership, it can be a lonely place, even if whether you're leading an entire company or whether you've just got a couple of people reporting to you. So I don't want you to be lonely. So what I invite you to do, as a way of closing here, is to pair up with someone near you. Could be someone you know or not, doesn't matter. And I want you to exchange a simple commitment with each other. I want one person to say to the other, I commit to doing whatever it is this week when I get back to work. Pick something that seems manageable, reasonable for you to actually do, to experiment with this idea of generous leadership, this idea of the power of just enough, this idea of giving what's needed and not giving what's not needed, this idea of saying less. Pick something that seems reasonable for you to do when you get back to work and say to your colleague, I commit to doing this, and then switch, and the other person will say to you, I commit to doing this. And then exchange phone numbers. And at the end of next week, get in touch with each other and say, so how'd your commitment go? This is what I tried to do, and tell me how it went for you. Because that kind of simple peer coaching is tremendously helpful in getting these ideas to stick and in helping you actually make use of them. And if you want that to continue week after week, that's fine. You can call each other week after week and recommit. But just take a moment now, please, to turn to a colleague and make a commitment to each other. All right, good. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. May I have your attention for one last thing? I'm sorry to cut you off, but as we know, we have many things to do. So thank you. I encourage you to take advantage of that as a practice. It can be really genuinely useful. So the last thing I want to ask of you is that there are evaluations that were handed out for you for this presentation. CNOC and I would be very grateful if you would complete that. That's the way that we can improve. And lastly, CNOC has very generously offered a free copy of my book to every delegate at the conference. It's available as a paperback or an ebook or an audiobook. Display A here. And it's at the doors on the way out. There's a table. I guess it's just around the corner on the way out. There's a table there with a sign that says free copies. Please, everyone, take one, help yourselves. Let me know what you think. I'll be very interested in your comments. I'm going to be here the rest of the session, rest of the day. So if anyone wants to talk to me further, I'd be very interested in finding ways to be of further help. So thank you.
We do probably have time for one, maybe two quick questions, if there is anyone. Or you can,
Yeah, it seems that a great deal of what you have to say comes from the issue of training teams to technical tasks such as sailing. Were there other departments of your life that gave rise to these insights, or has sailing and crewing and captaining been the basis of your understanding of how this stuff works?
The sea has definitely always been my greatest teacher, for sure. But I also have, as I say, I have run an architectural practice, I've run a nonprofit, so I have had lots of chances to make grievous errors in working with people, and I've learned a lot from that. Also, as was mentioned in the beginning, I have studied and taught meditation practice for 30 years, and so you may have felt some flavor of that in some of what I presented. Particularly, I think the notion of speech being overrated. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Thank you again, Crane. So we're going to, just before you run, there's a few administrators up, but just to thank Crane one more time for his presentation. Again, we have copies of the books, and if you ask him nicely as he's walking away, he may even sign the odd one in the hallway.
That's true, I'll be there.
But if you have a pen handy right now.